is a bit of a repetition for Wednesday, so not for Tuesday. So we forget actually all the BP and all the other competition aspects, because why are we doing the competition and this training in the end? To sharpen your mind and to brainstorm about this very important subject, the inclusion of African young people in Europe, in order to come up with good statements and advocacy at Wednesday and hopefully afterwards as well. So we would like at Wednesday to come up with an agenda of action and debate it with, there's somebody from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, from the House of Parliament, and other experts. As far as you can say, they are experts, but anyway. But so we hope then to debate with them an agenda of action which you and we and others, especially also Aydin, like Eli said, can take up as a way to lobby for an inclusion of African young people in Europe. How are we going to do this in 3/4 of an hour to debate about such a difficult and broad subject? I think we do it a bit in a brainstorming way, and for each subject, because we have defined education, labour and security as the main subjects of the debate for Wednesday. And we can debate about that, but let's at least take that as a starting point. Education, the ID is doing a lot of debate trainings in disadvantaged areas, here in Netherlands, in Belgium, and we hear that education is absolutely a high subject to be debated about if we talk about inclusion. So what I would like to ask you is to start a debate about education and to come up with your own statements, with your own problem. Let's just first focus on the problem. So I want to ask you to sit with your neighbor for 1 or 2 minutes, and just it doesn't have to be perfect or beautiful, but just come up with a problem you would like to debate today. And then we go on. So please take 1 minute, buzz with your neighbor, and come up with one problem in relation to education and exclusion, because we changed it to exclusion of young people within the education in Europe or in the Netherlands or whatever you focus on.
Yeah, since I came to Europe, I've seen that the European government spend a lot of money in the higher institutions to study Africa. You see a lot of centers that are studied in Africa, but they don't invest a lot of money to teach African youth and give accessibility to the higher education.
Okay, so lack of access for African youth into higher education.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, that's another problem.
Yeah, providing equal funding to schools, irrespective of whether they have from any address for better equipment and services
To schools in Europe.
Yeah.
In order to?
Yeah, in order like they should access the same, irrespective of whether somebody is coming from any kind of.
Okay, so that they diversify their educational tools,
Yeah, exactly,
to address the multicultural classes, etc. Yeah. Very good point. So make, making a big school. Okay. Okay, we know what you mean. So I want to close this because sorry for that, but we are very interested in your problems. So please, at the end of this debate, can you give them to me? So that we also can see how we integrate them in the debate at Wednesday. So that would be really beautiful. So I want to ask one of the panel members, let's start with Sami, to select one and then to give your position about it. So accessible citizenship, lack of access to higher education, and make school system more diverse.
I think I'll take lack of access to higher education for young African citizens or non-citizens or young people living here. I think education is key. Basic education is key for inclusion and access, and awareness for your rights and to demand and to access opportunities in general. Basic education is key, and with basic education I mean primary education and secondary education. That is key all over the world. Everybody talking about when you're educated, you are much more aware, and it's easier for you to spot out opportunities around you and work towards accessing them. But higher education is even more important to making decisions and defining present and future patterns, if you know what I mean. And because for those who have access to higher education, and I mean higher education from graduate level, postgraduate level, in most cases, decisions are made by people who have had access to that. Because for those who study that, it's not 1+1 anymore. It's about an analytical thinking. It's about problem argument. It's broader than that. So by denying, if I use the word denying, people access to higher education, you're also denying them access to that opportunity where they will be able not only to consume decisions, but also to participate in decision making. So in terms of inclusion, I believe it kind of will give young African people, and by extension, their own opinion and their own opportunity to define how the society distributes its opportunities by accessing higher education.
Anybody who would like to add something to Sammy's statement, and then we come to the how question, yeah?
I like what you said, especially the aspect of the opportunities. But then sometimes I say that it's not objective. The opportunities are not evenly distributed. For instance, in the Netherlands here, you see non-EU students have to pay like 8 times more the tuition fee. And sometimes I don't understand why it is so. You know, there's not such, it shouldn't be so if it's an open society that wants to give access to African students for higher education. So
what is the problem exactly where you're talking about?
The problem is why is it so that there's disparity in the proportion.
Okay, thanks a lot. That's a very good. Why is it like it is today? While there's a multicultural society, but the higher you come, you see a ceiling. Yeah. Yes.
Yep. I wanted to follow up because it was my idea.
Yes. Actually, it was my plan then to ask somebody to give a statement to come up. Yeah. Sorry.
There are like a number of African European citizens who also live and get the same opportunities, unlike the Africans who live here as a diaspora. And the access to higher education is also not even to them. And it is also important that the Europeans understand if it is included and if these people get the same opportunities as the other Europeans, they might just also become a better bridge between Africa and Europe. That will also increase a diplomatic stability and economic prosperity between the two continents.
Very good arguments.
Yeah. And the young youth, the young people from Africa, or those who have African descent, they would also like to be that bridge. They wanted to be that bridge, and it should be encouraged.
Very beautiful. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, we can also apply for all the creative ideas.
Okay, the way it presented it, it sounds more of the European governments giving to the Africans, but then also have to strengthen the point that Europeans, in fact, will benefit a lot if they provide that education to the Africans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because in economics, education, that's the parameter for human capital.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to increase the productivity of these people, and they are living in Europe. They are going to help the economies of Europe also, to grow and develop. So in a way, the governments will not have lost, they will have benefited. And the European governments are giving a lot of aid to African countries. And we Africans, we have roots there. And the aid which is sent to our governments, there are many reports of corruption, ABCD, but the money I get as ISA here in Europe, I send like maybe half of it back to Uganda, and it's well targeted for education, for housing, for ABCD. So it means that the remittances we get contribute are more effective than what you give to our governments. So if more of us are really very productive, earning enough here. We are going to help you to reduce the burden of the aid you're sending there without proper results.
Okay, that's a very strong statement. So I can't avoid to ask, does everybody agree to that? That you rather invest here in the African to bridge, but also to make sure that remittance are going back to the country instead of donating to governments or NGOs in Africa directly. I'd like to hear some disagreements, you. So while respecting the arguments, but it's a debate, so yes.
I disagree, and before my disagree there's if. I mean, I agree, but what if like the money we are going to send to Africa or any other country, they need this help? What if the corruption in this land was responsible for this money or this help, and the money and the investment or the effort went in not the right way? So by solving the problem, you have to recognize that there's another problem that has to have been solved. And I'm not talking about Africa, any other country. For example, we can take Greece. They are in a financial problem. Giving money is not a solution. The solution is you have to concrete your system that when I can help a little bit, it's going to be more effective. I mean, I can pay billions and keep paying billions because this is endless. But when I have a concrete system that I can avoid problems, then my help would be much more less and much more effective in the same way.
Okay, thanks a lot. But I think it's a relevant discussion. But I want to have the last disagreement with what you say, and then we conclude the problem. Yeah.
Yes, I have to disagree because first of all, should I stand?
Yeah, you can stand. What you like.
Yeah. Well, I have to disagree because I do not believe that if you, let's say, Africans come here and you invest in them, I don't have the illusion that they will go back as long as the environment in Africa is not the right environment. Because I know a lot of doctors, engineers, whatever Africans living in Europe, studied here, never went back, living good life here. So at the end of the day, what's the effects for Africa? It doesn't bring back the right effects for me. Maybe in the long run we have the illusion that they will go back, but what I see is they are assimilating to the society here. They are teaching their children to be more European than African. That's what I personally see. So
Okay.
I do not, but it doesn't mean I agree with the development that's going on, that it's the right way.
Yeah.
It should be changed. The development that is given,
Yes.
it shouldn't be, it should be changed in another manner, but that's a too long talk to...
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I see two hands. Just to, very quick. And then you, and then we close this session.
I think we can, by educating young Africans here, we can also solve the problem of sending aid to Africa. For example, if we have young, educated Africans who have connection and it becomes the bridge between Europe and Africa, these young people who are motivated, who already want to go back, can participate in the developments that are happening there. And it will cost less money. For example, in the case of Somalia, there is a stable government for about a year, but it has a lack of capacity. There was a program set up by the IOM and the United Nations with the help and the money of the European government, and they sent temporary return to young Somalis who are educated. And then they are going and doing paperwork and plan works for the ministries. It costs 1,500 euros.
Yeah.
And if the same agencies from the European NGOs who are doing the same work costs 6,000 euros for the taxpayers of the Europeans.
Okay, that's an argument for remittances, but I think your point that it is a bridge, I think we keep that, but we're not going now too deep into the... I really had said you, and then we close, yeah, exactly, and then we close...
I will have to disagree.
Yes,
by helping only Africans who live in Europe, we are creating a problem, or we are bringing elites. And these elites are so detached with their local, with their countrymen and women. So we are creating exclusivity than inclusivity.
Okay, it's no, I'm absolutely admiring your argument. So I don't know whether it's a training or you came already like this, but
I think to debate, because I really believe that when we debate, we can recognize our capabilities and we can set ourselves, like we say, now we organize like a group which will face the decision makers. And I really believe that we have diverse point of views and everyone is really taking it as a personal. And what I believe is that when African people really think of coming together, and organizing within like an association and so on, and they make this voice like they organize to become like one voice. This is possible to influence decision maker in order to change or even to take into consideration.
okay, and who are then, to your idea, the decision makers to be influenced? Who do you have in mind? Let's make it concrete.
I see politicians.
Politicians.
There is also constitution. You know, the constitution. If the constitution says, for example, I had in one of someone I talked to. He said there is some level that we can't reach as an African. But sometimes I wonder why. I think I know and I recognize that as African we have capabilities and we can reach this level. However, it looks like, you know, something blocking there. That is why I also want to say something with regard to how people say, okay, they shouldn't send the money. We can't also stop kind of bilateral agreement that lay between the Netherlands and certain African countries. And also, we as Africa don't have to look ourselves as like African is only one nation. There's so many problems to be addressed, to be also eradicated in Africa. That's why what I'm really begging African people is to come together, especially young people, because we have this dynamism, and we can really change. I really believe in change. And we have done something very special at European level, and I believe that in the Netherlands, this is going to happen.
My wife works for a school system here who do what they call MBO, which is kind of slightly, it's not university level at all, it's this kind of skill level schools. She's a director, secretary person, but they have in their system, they're obliged to take everybody who applies, and these are mainly nurses and dental assistants and stuff, very useful, valuable people. They're obliged to take everybody who applies, so long as they have they've left secondary school, so long as they get a minimal level of education, which is fairly low, they're obliged to do it. And that is, the government have said, someone high up in the government, right guy, whoever it is, lady, you must take everybody, regardless of race, background, so long as they are officially allowed to be educated in Holland, they must take, but the school has absolutely no capacity, it's hopeless, it's ridiculous.
To what to respond?
To the last question, how can you make sure that teachers, and let's broaden it up, and the school system has the capacity to address...
Well, I think it doesn't only count for the inclusion of African youth, it counts also for the inclusion of Muslim youth, non-Muslim youth, but from Moroccan descent, whatever descent you're from. Sorry?
That's Africa.
Oh, that's Africa. Sorry.
It's a secret, it's a secret.
I'll keep it a secret, sorry. No, but it counts for many young people, and also people that we deem not so fit for the system, and we say, can you fit into this education system? I think I have two points. One might be a bit of a bomb, because that's the bottom-up approach. But the first one is, I think, it also happens with the Zwarte Piet discussion we've had now. Sinterklaas has just come to Amsterdam. I won't get into that too much. No. But I think...
We had that on Friday.
You've done it, all right. But I think what Johan Galtung, who is a conflict theorist, talks about structural violence. And there's lots of structural violence in our society, in the sense that many of our laws, many of the things we've implemented into the structure, how our government works, how our school system works, is based on cultural assumptions we share as a mass. And this mass are those people that are the majority and have a strong will, not always the intention to hurt, but to influence the system. And I think, of course, we should also start in schools but we should start recognizing what the underlying cultural assumptions are about, I'm sorry, it's some of you, and deal with those, but get them out. Come to critical analysis on how are our actions influenced by everything we take with us culturally, from whether it's years and years, 200 years ago, like the VOC mentality Markman used to mention, to whatever other mentalities, and really critically analyze that, and then again look at our school system and those that teach others, and how critical it is also to see that we value people differently, and thereby setting different standards and sometimes making them lag behind. So I think there's a really like a conflict transformation analysis needed. But I also think it shouldn't be a conversation only amongst us, because I'm really struck by the elitist comment. I might take it a bit out of context, but I think it's also up to us. And I don't want to advertise my own initiative, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's not my own. I started it with my wife, but I think we should take sometimes the discussion out of education, formal education, and look also at non-formal education. But not only non-formal education, but also how we can educate each other. So what I've started, and we'll pilot it in Utrecht, is there are kitchen tables where you find people at the 21st of December in Utrecht, and they share their knowledge with whoever wants to come. Whether you're a refugee without status, whether you've been in university for 30 years as a teacher, it doesn't matter. Kitchen tables, strong content, stuff to learn, and I hope to build an online platform in 2014 where everyone can learn. So you can whether you get perspective, you get an outlook on a job, or you can talk yourself into higher education. We should also do it bottom up and then force the masses to change.
I see fingers.
Which date is the kitchen?
That's my advertisement.
Afterwards you can go to it, 21st of December.
21st of December in Utrecht. 22 workshops.
At what time?
I'll write it down.
Okay, he writes it down and he can share it with you.
And also about the expectation, what we have from Africans in Europe.
Okay.
Starting with, I study at the University of Amsterdam, and when I look at the scholarships programs of the UvA, it is the only one African country there we are partners with, and that is South Africa. I don't see Tanzania, I don't see Congo, I don't see Angola, I don't see even Morocco or the other countries. It's shown how we are looking to Africa, and immediately how we look to Africans who are here and Africans who are there, because we cannot say when we talk about accession to academic level, there are a lot of Africans in Africa who study at the university.
But I would say that it's because of the system. By saying that, it doesn't mean that I'm holding European accountable for what is happening in Africa, but I would say it's about the system. Even right now, I can illustrate it a little bit. We can see that between the West and what is happening now in Syria, between two blocks, which is the West, United States and Europe, and one block which is Russia, and we can illustrate it by going back in the past between communist bloc and the capitalist bloc. So I would say that it's this desire of holding just one side as the center of power. So we are the best, here are the best doctor, here are the best professor, here are the best teacher, here you can live good, here you can have a better, a better living. So it's all about this idea, but this idea is not touching, the simple European people. It's about a group of people, a group of elite who are like serving their own desire. And I would go back to what we are saying here about Africa, and I would say that I would pick what somebody has said, that's African. A lot of Africans here who studied here, they do not even want to go back, and they live good here and all those stuff. How are we expecting Africa to go ahead and all those stuff? I would say that, for instance, I would answer back to that question which has been raised by my friend here. I would take just an example of the Democratic Republic of Congo, because I come from Congo. How are you? 2 years ago, or if I'm not mistaken, 1 year and 6 months, the Netherlands has cut any sort of cooperation with the Democratic Republic of Congo. And they say that we are going just to cooperate with the Democratic Republic of Congo in the humanitarian aspect. How it's like you have a wound, instead of applying medicine upon, you are just cleaning it. So it's like people are dying. Instead of cutting the problem from the root, you are just cutting branches, and branches will grow again. And while the Netherlands is keeping cooperating with countries which are causing troubles and rebellion, or let's say mass death of people in the Republic of Congo, by saying that, I want to say that there is that big desire of the West of holding the West as a center of power, and therefore if the West will be so long persisting having this perception of things as we are the only center of power, and apart from us, there could be another part where people can also show that they have things, interesting things. They can have good doctor, they can have good student. That will be, we will have this dependence. To Europe, and we will have this trend of, always depending in Europe and all those stuff. And I would
See, he is not getting her body language. She's telling him, close it.
Thank you very much. Big applause, because you brought in the system, and not even the educational system, but the power system and the globalization of elites, which I think it's a very crucial point. We have to come to the end, and actually the panel has the last word, so we start with you. But wait, sorry, yeah, it's really very nice to talk with you actually. It's more storytelling than sorry, I love Africa, so I'm really very interested in everything, and I hope you also in each other. But we go back to you, Norman, and then I have one last question for the three of you. Yeah.
I'd just like to say that it's nothing to do with a privilege or whatever. As far as the host country is concerned, it is remarkably smart to include you guys in the system. We were talking about this over lunch. You guys have so much. You see things that we absolutely do not see. You have creative talent. You have all kinds of talents that we lack completely. If we, Europe, were to embrace this, include you, encourage this would be a much richer Europe.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, then
I have a question.
1 minute. Oh, question. Yes.
You have just said that it's a challenge for the host country to include people here. But the question I'm dealing with from the beginning of all this is like, are you trying to include us in Western society, or are you trying to include us into globalization? Wait.
Is the basic.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know. I don't believe that you can make a thing without a purpose.
We are talking about Europe, and last year we talked about African young people, and that was absolutely too broad. Yeah. And it's inevitable to also touch Africa, development cooperation, medicines, all these issues. But I would like to, for the last part, to bring it back to Europe. And I want to come back to the point of, is it a right or a privilege? Well, as European citizens, there are many, many conventions. Even the Grondwet, what is that, the Constitution, they all confirm and reconfirm that everybody has the right for access to quality education, access to labor, protection of physical violence, etc. So focusing on Europe, because I think for Wednesday we shouldn't go too broad, because I think it makes more, it is good to focus the discussion really on Europe, and knowing, and I will list them down for you and I will send them around Monday, that there are quite some conventions who are really backing up people in Europe and where you really can hold governments accountable for. So if you say, we as Africans, or not Africans, but we as European who like to have a multicultural society in which everybody is respected, we can and need to use the conventions to hold governments and the politicians and all their stakeholders, or all the stakeholders, accountable for, and then to come up with the question of how. And that's a deep question, and I really would like to challenge you, what Bas said, to think about a how question, because Wednesday we only have, I think, 3 hours, or maybe not even, and then it would be really good if we focus, we position it but then we focus on the how question from out of the idea that you have the right, people have the right in Europe, if you are a citizen, and even if you are non-documented, there are also definitely rights for to be and to have education, labor, and security. So I really, that's why I wanted to ask you to raise, and you said you should, so already you said it's not there, but it needs to be there, and Amnesty and
my friends, we are completely lost, and I hope we don't get even lost more. It is a very complicated discussion, but I think as it is demonstrated here, the big challenge is focus. There's clear lack of focus, and that's why in any panel you go, in any discussion you go, the discussion is all over the place. At the end of the day, you come out saying, what did we discuss about? And the question of how then can never be answered, because are you answering this or are you answering that? Having said that, already there's two clear discussions, and it's good Yvonne has clarified that, is that are you African or are you African European? That's the first discussion. Yes. And then if you decide we are talking about African European, then please forget about the other ones. Because otherwise then those are two priorities, and the focus are different. So you cannot have an answer for the two, otherwise you get even more lost. To sum it up, I'll say the big question is about articulation and creating a greater voice which is viable, which is informed, and which is vibrant. And I think that's what my friend, I think, is working hard to achieve. What you find is that if you, from the education angle, we are focusing on two levels, policy and advocacy. But are you, somebody said, oh, let's target our policy and advocacy agitation to the politicians and to policymakers, which is good enough. But what we forget is that countries and governments and systems, and I like the word systems, are dictated by needs and priorities of their own target. Exactly. Yes. So we can argue, we can fight, we can kill, we can cry, we can go to sleep, but if we cannot demonstrate the advantage and priority, not to the policymakers, but to the common denominator, what we call. Because a politician will react towards the electorate. So the mistake sometimes we do in policy and advocacy is that we target the politician. And we think they're ignoring us. But they're not ignoring us. It's because the voice and the message they're getting from whoever matter, what we call the denominator, is completely different. So what I would say, how, I would answer the last question, how, is to have to create a critical mass. If you allow me, the problem is when we focus about Africa, is that yes, it's a policy of government to empower Africa, and one of the policies is to get vibrant students from Africa to study here and go back. And that's why every discussion that we ever have is with educated African people who in 1 year or 2 years time will go back. Yes, but the Africans here, they go to do the productive work. They're never in this discussion. So I think the how is to find mechanisms and ways of integrating Africans within the Africans, Europeans, within the systems, and articulate that greater voice and make it vibrant.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sammy. After the whole program, you can talk with each other.
I'll keep it very short because it's witness time. So I'll be part of your critical mass, first of all. So that's I'd love to be part. And the second thing is, I think for next Wednesday, needs and priorities of the people that call themselves politicians, that are there, whether presenting a ministry or presenting a municipality, whatever, make sure you get to know them a bit in advance. What are their needs, what are their priorities, and how do you respond to that?
Yeah, so Google them.
The critical mass will need years and maybe months to develop, or longer, but make sure Google them and find out what they did on these topics. Inclusion, a privilege or a right. Don't take that word, but include it in what? Is it labor, education, then what kind of education? Make sure you make things specific, concrete, and touch the person, but make sure you touch through the needs and priorities this person sets.
Okay, thanks a lot,
Yes, I also want to add to that, but first of all, I want to say that it is a right to the inclusion of African people is a right, because, as my friend said, we are not talking about those who came to study, because we also consider those who are here citizens who are also affected by this exclusion. And also, I also acknowledge that we, as an African, stand as an inevitable bridge, and knowing both reality of African and European, and also contribute to the development of this of Europe, as well as also thinking on how we can also develop Africa, which means that, of course, it is really a right. How then? I also come to what have been said previously, is that we just have to come together to target problems and priorities. And maybe I was thinking of to have like a forum of discussion, and in order to know what are problems that are affecting us, and to link them to priorities and to know how we can address it, in order to feel like to just have some answers to the situation that we have.
Okay, thanks a lot. Mama, would you say as last message today?
One last thing is, do never ignore the personal level, okay? Get together, you've got together here, get together with people here, get together with people from your country, get together as individuals, as people, as humans. Never underestimate the power of people with people.
Okay, wow. Okay.
My name is Tarek Hajwez and I'm from Syria, and I live in Holland like from 1 year and a half.
And what's your message regarding the inclusion of African youth in Europe?
I don't have a very large background about the African background in Europe, but according to the last 2 days and the coming 3 days, the coming 3 days, I think it's very interesting. It's very rich. I didn't have this such a large information. They are really so interesting, and yeah, the way and the warmth that you feel from it from them, that's very unique.
And how do you think that learning debate will help you achieve your goals?
I think debating is very important for each one, like from between friends, between politicians. Absolutely, they are using it in a nasty way, but it's very important to formalize, that we can form our communication and to understand each other, that we can reach very important points with less talk and a more efficient way of communication. So I think even between friends and mother and father, and like any kind of relation, it has the debate of the skills of debate has to be there, I think, from my point of view.
Je m'appelle Mike Maurice Mwamba, je viens de la République démocratique du Congo et je vis maintenant en Irlande ici. Le message que j'ai pour aujourd'hui, c'est que je voudrais que ici en Europe, on considère l'homme à travers ce qu'il est, ses capacités, ses valeurs, et le niveau d'intégration, donc l'éducation. Je pense qu'avec le débat, c'est plus mieux, parce qu'en débattant, on peut se faire entendre, on peut être écouté par d'autres personnes. Je pense que c'est la meilleure voie pour qu'on puisse se faire entendre. C'est pour ça que je suis là.
Hi, my name is Najid Boulavdal. I am a teacher and a community worker based in Brussels. I organize leadership workshops for Brussels youth, mostly African. I think the inclusion of African Europe is often viewed as if it's a benefit only for the African youth. I think it's very important to realize that the inclusion of African youth is beneficial for the whole society. And I think Europe really misses out on a very important source of energy, of knowledge and of intelligence when not using this group. I think that up to now, most people have been working in closed circles and on individual basis. Learning to debate will also help to create a critical mass and to work together. Debating is also a tool to talk to politicians and decision makers.
My name is Elena. I study in Wageningen. I'm studying international development. And yeah, I came here because of, first of all, of the topic, because I find the topic personally really interesting, but also I like to learn about debating. And what I found here, it was really nice to discuss all these issues and to have these experiences of debating. And yeah, it was sometimes emotional, sometimes not, and you could really see the progress, how every one of us got better and acquired more skills of debating. And yeah, I like the fact of meeting new people here and building new networks, and also it's not getting boring, because there's always happening something new. Today we can actually talk to real decision makers who could consider our concerns, so that's a great opportunity.
My name is Foli Teko, and I live in Rotterdam, and then I am an artist and I'm a writer, and I take part in this debate workshop, and today is the final stage of that debate, that workshop, and I find it so far interesting because we have points raised up, and yeah, I'm curious about what the last stage will bring.